Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I am so excited to bring you my friend, Sonnie Linebarger, today. She is an executive coach, healthcare consultant, registered nurse, keynote speaker, and a podcast host. She is an innovative thought leader with more than 20 years experience within the healthcare space. Sonnie has taken all that she has learned over the last 20 plus years, climbing the ladder from CNA to CEO, and poured that into creating her own company, Evoke Greatness. She founded at the intersection of what she excels at and what she is passionate about, a healthcare consulting and executive coaching firm, helping healthcare organizations optimize their outcomes, scale their business, maximize their efficiencies, and develop their people to reach peak performance. Crafting a people-centered culture is a passion of hers, and she is committed to the mentorship, development, and transformation of others. I can attest to all of that. Sonnie is the host of a top 5% globally ranked podcast, Evoke Greatness. I was just on it, where she dives deep into the stories of how successful people have navigated their journeys towards greatness, all while uncovering and sharing the valuable lessons they learned along the way. That is a mouthful. Welcome to the show, Sonnie.
Yay, I'm so excited to be on.
I'm so happy to have you here. This is such a treat for all of us. So the first question I ask on every episode is, tell us your story.
Yeah, so I feel like I have just kind of a unique story, right? I went to school to be a nurse. So as you talked about in my bio, I started out as a CNA. And so for those who may not know what a CNA is, it's the person who typically, if your grandma is in a nursing home or your grandpa's in a nursing home, they come in and they do the bath and they change briefs and they do all of the things, like they're at the very bottom of the rung, right? But they truly do so much of the work
So
to
much.
provide care for our elderly population. And so that's where I started out. And that was really what made me fall in love with our geriatric population. And that's what really led me into the desire to become a nurse. And so I was a CNA for a good handful of years while slowly working my way through nursing school. And then I thought, this is it. I want to be a nurse. This is what I'm going to do forever. And, I'd like to think of myself as a really good nurse. And oftentimes when you're really good at what you do, people want to tap you to do more.
Of course.
And so never had a desire to go into leadership, just wanted to be bedside, providing really good care. That was it. Like that checked my box and it filled my heart. And I had people who saw things in me that I did not. They saw a future that I couldn't yet see. And so they tapped me in learning new things, learning new skill sets, polishing and refining myself. And so all of a sudden I was moving into leadership roles and then got into operations. I had always done the clinical side of things and was really comfortable, was an expert there, but I was curious about how the rest of the business functioned, right? How did sales and how did finance and how did clinical, how did all those weave in together to make a really profitable business? And so I was a regional clinical director at the time, went to my chief operating officer of a really large healthcare organization. I said, hey, I have no experience in operations, but I'm really curious about all of this. And I think that despite my not having experience, I can assure you I will run circles around anyone with experience.
And you
And
do.
she said, oh, okay. And so our conversation, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I just made a total fool of myself, but at least I put it all out there. And as I was walking out of her office, she said, Sonnie, I wouldn't be here sitting in this seat right now as the chief operating officer if someone wouldn't have seen something in me. And so that was then my entree into operations. And then I was the chief operating officer for a national hospice company, leading thousands of employees across 25 different states, and did that for about 4 years until I decided to kind of bet all on myself and go into entrepreneurship and start my own company with consulting and executive coaching. And so that's what I've been doing for the last almost 2 years.
I mean, there's so much in there. I'm just so delighted to dig in on. So one of the words you used is one of my favorites, and that is being curious. And I think, tell me your perspective, but I think that's such an important quality for leaders to have. And whether you're an aspiring leader or you're an existing leader, if you're not curious, you're not learning. What do you think about that?
I think if you are not curious, you are missing out.
Yeah.
I did not tap into my curiosity probably, further in my career than I should have. I should have tapped into it sooner. But what I found was even the leaders that saw things in me that I couldn't yet see, it was something that they were able to see. And so I thought, gosh, as I'm growing in my leadership, I want to be able to see those things. And so that's really what got me curious. And then it was like you can apply that and it translates to every single aspect of your career and your life. And that has led me to my personal belief of there is darn near next to nothing that I can't do. Like opportunities are limitless. I am limitless in what I can do. If I really put my mind to something and I get curious and I can see a future that doesn't yet exist for myself or others, there's almost nothing I can't do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, you're testament to that, but I love, people look back on the last 2 years of my building my business and they're like, you did a podcast, you wrote a book, you got awards, you're coaching, you're speaking. That's so much. And when you're in it, you don't feel like it's that much.
Sure.
You just kind of are in it and it's just, you're just doing it. But if I wasn't curious, I wouldn't have ever done those things. I didn't think I could create a website. I created a website. I didn't know how to podcast. I wasn't a journalist. Like all of those things came out of curiosity and challenging myself. And I just love that you did that over and over again. But you said something that happened to me in my career, and I'd love you to dig a little deeper on this. But that leader that saw something in you, was she the one that helped take you to that next step in your trajectory as a leader? I mean, you put it out there and said, I can run circles around these people. Did she say, yeah, I believe in you?
Yeah. And what was interesting is my supervisor at the time was almost trying to dissuade me from
Yeah,
moving to that role. And I can look back now and see I was the star student in the role that I was in, right?
yep,
And so you don't ever want to lose that person.
of course.
But man, I thought, what an opportunity that you know, she could have handled that differently. And so I
Yeah.
did end up moving into operations. I did end up getting the role, ended up promoting multiple times after that, year after
Yeah.
year. And so garnered a lot of success out of it. What I will say is, even though, that opportunity was created, so much about what you're absorbing in the environment around you, a lot of it is what to do, right? You have mentors who are showing you what to do. I think you equally as important need to pay attention to the things that you are observing around you and what not to do as well.
No
Because
question.
I think that those things are what really form and shape you as a leader. And so that experience, though it was full of lots of opportunities, there were also lots of experiences where it showed me what not to do.
Mm. So let's dig in on that a little bit because that's one of my favorite topics, and that's failure. And I always say, you learn way more from failure than you ever do from success. And, talk about how failure helped shape you and maybe your observations of, what not to do.
Right, right. Well, so something comes to mind, and that is being a leader, and it feels like the utmost failure when you have something taken away from you.
Oh, yeah.
And I oversaw a region, and we were a growing company, expanding really quickly, lots of merger and acquisition activity. And so
Mm.
in that, your region was changing, right? I started out having Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That was my region. So like coast to coast, right?
What?
So then it turned to like Arizona, California, Colorado. So it was ever shifting. Well, I we had our very first merger and acquisition in my area. And so what ended up happening is I ended up a year and a half into that, getting that part of my region taken away.
Mm.
And I remember, and my leader at the time was pivotal in this process. And he has taught me some really amazing things that I then, after the initial hurt, right? Because there's a lot of emotion involved in it.
Yeah.
There's a ton of ego involved in it, right?
Hmm.
Whether we want to admit it or not, when something is taken away from us, you're saying, I'm not good at what I'm doing. And so through that process, had a great boss, and he just said, look, Sonnie, I'm going to do something that you're not going to be happy about. I'm going to take this away from you, and it is going to help you in the long run, but it's going to really suck right now. And so literally, I don't think I spoke to him for 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Like I was mad and
Yeah.
I was insulted, you know, there were all
Yeah.
these things, but I was failing to see the opportunity in it, right? So I had to let the emotions die down. I had to let the ego die down. And so through that process, I really started focusing on, I reached out to several leaders and I said, hey, I trust that you'll provide me honest feedback. I want to know where you feel like my weakest points are. Like,
Mm.
where do I have the most opportunity to grow? And a theme that each of them came and brought back to me was being short-sighted.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, but so again, it's like starting to explore and be curious, but what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Well, that means, Sonnie, that you are from an operational perspective, you're thinking in the now. And again, operations was still pretty new to me, but you're thinking in the now. So what I did is I really started going heavy on data and analytics because that then would allow me to start forecasting out. That would
Yeah.
allow me to start seeing a bigger picture, a little bit more far out. And so process was the best process that could have ever happened to me because he was right. Through
Mhm.
that, I completely started to morph my leadership and came out of this like, you know, blinders looking at what's going on today to really forecasting the future.
Yeah.
And so I grew immensely out of that. But more importantly, how he handled that,
Mm.
I have then had the opportunity to experience that on the giving side of it,
Yes, 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 yes.
understanding what it was like to be on the receiving side of it. And so, you know, throughout the years, I've had to take some things away from people.
Yeah.
And I always, one of the first things I tell them is, this is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
You are not going to see the opportunity in this right now. You're going to see that you're really upset with me. You're going to feel insulted and your ego is going to be bruised.
Mm.
But I'm going to tell you right now, I went through this personally. And
Yeah.
here's what I came on the other side of. And so I think when you can be vulnerable and authentic and showing up that, look, this happens to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't share the, you know, the
Yeah.
learning side or the failure side. And so people feel really alone. And so when they feel less alone and they feel like you can really relate and even help them navigate through emotionally, they they stick with it.
Yeah.
And so I
Well,
think
and
that's the important part.
I think that leader was incredible for his delivery. And I can remember having, I was by far the most successful manager on my team. And I remember them saying, okay, now I had the whole East Coast and we're going to take away the Southeast. And now we're going to take away the Mid-Atlantic. And now you're just going to handle, you know, New York and New England and tri-state area. And then they started to take away New York. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm so insulted. I was so angry. And I went and found another job because I was so mad. And
Right?
had that leader, he couldn't explain why he was doing it. He was being strong armed, but it was a mistake. And I do think that when somebody can deliver with heart and especially the tough messages. And I knew this from when I had to lay people off. If you are consistently leading with your heart, those messages come a little easier because they know it's not you. They know that it's out of your hands. You've had to, you know, been forced to make these decisions. And I think that's just so, so important. I just love that that leader did that for you. So I know you did a lot of work with hospice and I think hospice, people have one idea of what hospice is. And it's just been my experience with my father-in-law. He's got Alzheimer's. And so he's in hospice. He's not near death, but he's in hospice. Can you just explain to people what hospice really is?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to. So hospice is just, it's such a pivotal point in my career. And I'll give you a little bit of background first. I came
Mm.
from the pediatric ICU as a nurse.
Attention, visionary leaders. Are you ready to elevate your leadership style and create an exceptional workplace that stands out from the crowd? I'm here to introduce you to a game-changing resource that will transform the way you lead and shape your company culture. It's time to embrace the power of top-down culture. This practical guide empowers your leadership for lasting success, helping you create a workplace where everyone thrives. Get top-down culture today, and let's reshape the future of leadership together. Oh, wow.
That's actually where I did my nurse internship, my externship, and then I grew to love that side of things. Well, then I go to make a change and it's back into the geriatric population and into hospice. And I will tell you, there's a lot of similarities, right? From beginning of life and end of life.
No question.
But hospice, there is a terrible misunderstanding around what hospice is, which is where people go to die.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get a bunch of medication. Your mother, father, grandma, grandpa, loved one is not going to be able, they're going to be zonked out of it.
Yeah.
They're going to be in a, and so they're not going to be able to, and then they die. Well,
Yeah.
look, the harsh matter of the fact is we're all going to die, right?
We're dying now.
However, yeah, the gift of hospice is walking somebody through that final chapter of their life.
Yeah.
They know it. They, it is not something that is unexpected, though the news may be unexpected. Typically what hospice is where you have an overall prognosis, right? So whatever your disease process is, if it follows the natural trajectory, you will have 6 or less months to live. So what does that mean? That means that we have patients in hospice that still go out and they go do their activities. They still go to the grocery store. They still have family over and visiting. It doesn't even mean that they're always just in bed all the time.
Yep.
So there is a really big misconception around that, even so with physicians. And so we talk about educating physicians, and physicians don't want to be educated, right? They went through a lot of schooling to get their credentials. And what happens is there's even just kind of that misconception with physicians. And so they refer patients to hospice too late, which is where you get this misconception that if they would have referred somebody who needed hospice 6 months earlier, then that person would have been able to get care from a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, that CNA that I was talking about, this whole core center of support to walk not only the patient through their final chapter of life, but to wrap their arms around the family and educate them and walk them through what's to expect at each next step. And so it's really a beautiful gift of a benefit that doesn't get taken advantage of as often or for the entirety. And
thank
so,
you. Thank you for explaining that. I really, I run into this all the time. I have a ton of people who's, we're in that generation of, we're losing a lot of parents right now. And there's a number of people that I know that are in a situation where hospice would be of enormous help to them. But even the patients like, don't you dare do that. And like, you're telling me I'm dying. I'm not dying. And it's such a shame, because if they understood what you just explained, they could take that as a relief instead of a fear. So yeah, I get that. So, okay. So I love to ask this question. What inspires you?
Oh, geez. The future, I think, inspires me. What I feel like through the trajectory of my career and my life and all of the things that I have gotten to go through, right? Not that I've went through, but that I've had the opportunity to go through, is to show people what's possible, right? So typically, somebody who is a CNA might go to nursing school, but they don't climb to the C-suite, right? But guess what? I want to show people that's what's possible. Someone who only has their associate's degree typically isn't going to go into leadership into the C-suite. And yet I'm going to be teaching with the University of Louisville this coming spring, a course on coaching and talent management that typically doesn't happen. So my life is a representation, and all that I do is a representation of what is possible for other people by showing my experiences.
Oh, I love that. And you have charted your own course. And not only that, you are paying it forward. You are teaching people the possible. And I just give you so much praise and credit for that. I think more of this, please. So who are your clients now, Sonnie? Who do you work with?
Yeah. So I typically work with senior and executive women. Primarily, it's been in the healthcare space because that's the water I've swam in for the last 20 years. And so those women who are looking to grow to that next level, ambitious, driven, but maybe don't know what's possible, maybe don't feel like they have the presence. Oftentimes, how many of us battle with imposter syndrome? How many of us battle with, we've never been to a board table before, or had a board seat. And so how do I know what to expect? We may not have a mentor that we can role play with. So a lot of that is what I do, is walking through what are their biggest pain points. But as I say, it's, we can address the professional things, but if we're honest, right, personal and professional growth really goes hand in hand. And so oftentimes it's navigating the things at home that we're working and coaching through as much as we are doing it in the office or with your team or with your the board that you report to.
I love that. I love that. Talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yes. So I love to share the stories of people who have navigated their way, towards this thing that we call greatness, which may mean something a little bit different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Why I love to share this is early on in leadership, I wanted to be that perfect leader. Well, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, if I'm completely honest, I was green. I had no idea what I was doing, but I didn't want to show anyone that I didn't know what I was doing. And so in that, I would make a mistake and not tell anyone.
Sure.
I would feel horribly embarrassed or show up to a table feeling like I was absolutely unworthy of being at that table, or someone was going to stand up and go, "What is she doing here?"
Oh yeah, we all
And
felt
so
that.
I had all of these fears, but I didn't talk about it and I didn't share it. And no one else was sharing theirs with me.
No.
And so as I made all these terrible mistakes and I wasn't leading people as well as I could, I started saying, wait a second. Someone is facing something that I have faced before. I'm going to tell them how maybe it wasn't the best way to go through it, but I'm going to make them feel less alone. I'm going to tell them my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give it from a perspective of wisdom, right? Because I've been around the block a time or two,
Yep.
experienced a thing or two. And so I wanted to make sure that all the potholes that I've ever stepped in, if I could share those potholes, just maybe someone else could avoid the pothole by hearing my experience.
Well,
And so that was the intention.
That's being vulnerable. That's being a true human, heart-centered leader. And when you do that and you share that vulnerability, it doesn't discredit you. It lifts you up and it makes you a generous leader. It makes you relatable. And I always say it's not hard, it's human. And so whenever you can help people and learn from your mistakes, that's such a generous way to lead. And I just give you massive credit for figuring it out. We all kind of figure it, well, a lot of us figure it out later in our career, but good for you to recognize it.
And so it's really not just about my stories, it's also amplifying other stories because everybody's experience is a little different. And so while some people may relate to my background, some people are like, I'm not in healthcare. And so I bring people from, all over, all different career paths and industries and professional walks of life for their zone of genius and to share their experience, because it's not about our mountaintop stories, right? Even though the Instagram highlight reel is what people love to see, it is trudging through the dark, cold valley with bloody knees and feeling horrible, right? Like that's where all of a sudden these light bulbs and these elements of wisdom that are going to shape us when we get to the top of that mountain. That's where the magic is.
I agree. And that's what I always teach when we're talking about how to tell your story or sell your story. You talk about the worst thing that ever happened to you, and we're not focused on the car crash. We're focused on the growth from that horrible moment. And that's what makes you really interesting. So I love that you figured that out. So what's next for Sonnie?
Yeah, so I am just continuing to kind of pour in to this. I still feel like I'm a baby entrepreneur, right? I'm just shy of 2 years into it. And so I think really trying to look and see how can I refine the content that I'm putting out there on my podcast, right? I really want to get in touch with my audience to figure out how can I add as much value as I can to them. Because at the end of the day, it's like a little bit selfish, right? Because I'm getting to talk with these people. You've probably experienced this as well.
Yes.
You get the gift of being able to hear people's stories and engage. And it's like, then you get to share that with your audience. And that is so amazing. And then, continuing to grow and refine my business from consulting with other hospice companies, helping them figure out where those pitfalls are and helping them avoid them, preparing them to get ready to sell, working with private equity companies. So yeah, it's a pretty like cool canvas when you can create what exactly you want to do on this side of entrepreneurship.
Oh, we have so much in common. I love it. What would you like your legacy to be?
Ooh, I think being of service. I think that is the biggest thing. Again, it's that resounding theme of showing people what's possible. If 1 or 1,000,000 people could understand what's possible in their own life and recognize when they actually don't have to accept a no, when life is full of loopholes, you just got to figure them out. You got to get creative and curious enough to find them out. That is, that's an incredible legacy for me. And I think, the same, passing that into my kids to give them that same mindset.
Yeah. I applaud you so much for stepping into discomfort and challenging yourself and growing, because you are a phenomenal example for your kids. And I'm living a very parallel path to you. So they're watching me, and it's a really wild thing to see their perception of what I'm doing. And so I imagine your kids are experiencing the same. So Sonnie, how do people find you?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect. That's probably where I spend most of my time. And then my website is evokegreatness.com. And then podcast is on all podcast platforms, and that's Evoke Greatness Podcast.
Perfect. Well, as I said, I was a guest there. She has a great show. She is a phenomenal interviewer, and she's my friend. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Sonnie, thank you for being on the show. And if you liked what you heard, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel or leave a 5-star review at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much, everybody. Go lead with greatness. Take care. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.